I wasn't even invited, but somehow I was the reason everyone was in that room. Let that sink in for a second. A room full of people who spent years pretending I didn't exist, now sitting around a table, waiting on me. I stood outside the glass door, staring at my own reflection. My hand hovered over the handle, but I couldn't move. Inside, I could hear faint voices, my mom's voice included, sharp, controlled, familiar. The same voice that once looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You ruined my life the moment you were born." I was 17 when she said that, standing in our kitchen, holding a plate I suddenly couldn't feel anymore. I remember wondering, what did I even do to deserve that? But here's the thing. She didn't just say it once. She made sure I felt it every single day. No birthday celebrations, no seat at family dinners unless someone was visiting, no photos. Literally, there are albums in that house where I don't exist, cropped out or just never included. Meanwhile, my younger brother Ethan, he was everything. The pride, the future, the one worth investing in. And me? I was the mistake she never stopped punishing. So I left. At 18, with a backpack, a part-time job, and zero support, I walked out and never looked back. No calls, no texts, no holidays, nothing. And honestly, it was quieter that way. Cleaner. So tell me this. Why would a family that erased me suddenly need me? Why would a lawyer track me down, send multiple messages, and insist I show up for a mandatory estate meeting? An estate I was never supposed to be part of? Even Ethan, who barely acknowledged me for years, texted me out of nowhere. "You need to come. This is serious." Serious? That word didn't sit right. Because the last time something was serious in my family, it ended with me being pushed further out. I took a slow breath. My fingers tightened around the door handle. Inside, a man in a suit glanced up and locked eyes with me. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Thank you for finally joining us, Ava. We couldn't proceed without you." Without me? What could possibly be so important that the one person they erased was now the one they needed most? And, more importantly, what weren't they telling me? Growing up, I wasn't just ignored, I was erased. Let me explain what I mean, because ignored sounds too soft, too normal. What I lived through was intentional, calculated. Do you know what it feels like to walk into your own living room and see family photos on the wall and realize you're not in a single one? Not because you weren't there, but because someone made sure you didn't exist in them. That was my reality. My mom, Diane, had this way of controlling everything without raising her voice. She didn't need to yell. A look was enough. A cold, distant look that told you exactly where you stood. And where I stood? At the very bottom. If there was a family dinner, I'd find out about it when I heard laughter downstairs. If there was a trip, I'd see the pictures afterward. Ethan smiling, my mom glowing, captions about family time. No mention of me. Ever. And Ethan, he wasn't cruel, not really, but he didn't question it either. He grew up in a world where I just didn't matter. So to him, that was normal. That hurt in a different way, because it meant I wasn't just rejected, I was invisible. But here's where it gets confusing. Sometimes my mom would switch. Out of nowhere, she'd act normal, ask me how school was, buy me something small, even smile. And for a second, just a second, I'd think maybe things are changing. But they never did. Those moments, they were like bait, just enough to keep me hoping, just enough to make the rejection hurt even more when it came back. And it always came back. The breaking point? It wasn't some huge explosion. It was something small, quiet. My high school graduation. I worked hard for that, really hard. I thought maybe this would be the moment she'd be proud, the moment I'd finally feel like I belonged. But when I got home that day, there was no celebration, no dinner, no "I'm proud of you." Instead, she looked at me and said, "Don't expect this to change anything. You're still on your own." That was it. No emotion, no hesitation, just final. And later that night, when I told her I was leaving, really leaving, she didn't stop me. Didn't even try. She just said something that stuck with me for years. "Don't come back expecting anything. I've already made sure you're not part of this family anymore." At the time, I thought it was just another cruel thing to say. But standing outside that meeting room now, I couldn't help but wonder, what did she mean by "made sure"? And for a while, it actually worked. I disappeared. No dramatic bye-bye, no one chasing after me, no calls asking if I was okay. Just silence. At first, it was terrifying. I was 18, broke, and completely on my own. I took whatever jobs I could find, waitressing, retail, cleaning offices late at night. Some days I barely slept, other days I barely ate. But you know what? It was still better than living in that house. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. No one was watching me. No one was waiting for me to mess up. I could breathe. Slowly, things started to come together. I found a small apartment, made a few friends, built something that actually felt like mine. And my family, they kept living like I never existed. I'd hear things occasionally, through distant relatives or random social media posts I couldn't resist checking. Birthdays, holidays, vacations, smiling photos, perfect captions. Family is everything. Funny, right? Because I knew the truth behind those pictures. And eventually, I stopped checking. I stopped caring. Or at least that's what I told myself. Until the messages started. The first one came from an unknown number. "Hello, this is Mr. Collins' office. We need to speak with you regarding a family estate matter." I almost laughed. Estate? What estate? My mom made it clear I was not getting anything. Not even acknowledgement, much less inheritance. So I ignored it. Then another message came. And another. Then a voicemail. "This is urgent. Your presence is required." Required? That word didn't sit right. No one in my family had ever required me for anything, so why now? I almost blocked the number, but then Ethan texted me. Out of nowhere, after years of barely saying a word. "You need to come. Mom didn't tell you everything." I stared at that message for a long time. Didn't tell me what? What could possibly be so important that the one person they erased was now the one they needed most? And, more importantly, what weren't they telling me? And then came the message that changed everything. Another voicemail. This time, different tone, more direct. "There are details regarding your identity that must be clarified in person." My identity?
What does that even mean? At that point, it wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something else, something heavier. Because deep down, a small part of me started to wonder, what if everything I thought I knew wasn't true? So I said yes. I agreed to come. And now, standing in that room with everyone staring at me like I didn't belong, I realized something immediately. This wasn't just about money. This was about something they had been hiding for a long time. And whatever it was, my mom clearly didn't want it to come out. The moment I walked in, everyone looked at me like I wasn't supposed to exist. Not just surprised. Uncomfortable. like my presence alone was a problem no one wanted to deal with. I stepped inside anyway, slowly, calm on the outside, but my chest felt tight, like something was about to snap. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. My mom, Diane, was sitting at the far end of the table, perfectly composed, hands folded, expression neutral. But I noticed it, that tension in her jaw, that quick glance she gave the lawyer before looking away. She knew something, and she didn't want me to hear it. "Let's begin," the lawyer said, gesturing for me to sit. His name was Mr. Collins. Mid-50s, sharp, professional, the kind of man who didn't waste words. He opened a folder, adjusted his glasses, and spoke like he'd done this 1,000 times. "This meeting concerns the estate of your late grandfather, Richard Hale." Grandfather? That caught me off guard. I barely knew the man. A few distant memories, a couple of brief visits when I was younger, but nothing significant. He was never part of my life in any real way. So why was I here? Mr. Collins continued, calm and precise. Mr. Hale left behind a legally binding will with very specific instructions regarding the distribution of his assets. Diane shifted in her seat. Subtle, but noticeable. He also included conditions that require all immediate family members to be present before the contents can be fully executed. That's when the room got quieter. He turned a page, and one of those conditions directly involves Ava. Every head in the room turned toward me. I felt it, that shift, that weight. Not curiosity anymore. Something closer to tension. Diane finally spoke, her voice controlled, but sharper than before. "This is unnecessary. We already discussed this." Mr. Collins didn't even look at her. "With respect, Diane, the will is very clear. All stipulations must be followed exactly as written." That's when I knew. Whatever was coming, she had tried to stop it. And failed. Mr. Collins continued. "Before we proceed with the distribution of the estate, there is a matter that must be clarified, a matter that significantly impacts the legitimacy of the inheritance." My stomach dropped. Legitimacy? What does that even... He paused, looked directly at me. Not at my mom, not at anyone else, just me. And in that moment, everything else faded out. "Miss Ava," he said carefully, "there is information regarding your parentage that has been legally documented and intentionally withheld." The room went completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. Even Diane. For the first time since I walked in, she looked nervous. Actually nervous. Mr. Collins took a breath. And then he said the words that changed everything. "The woman you know as your mother is not your biological parent. The woman you know as your mother is not your biological parent." For a second, I didn't react. Not because I didn't hear him, but because my brain refused to process it. Not my mother? Then what was she? All those years, all that anger, all that rejection, it wasn't just personal. It was something deeper, something hidden. Mr. Collins continued, his voice steady, cutting through the silence. "You are the biological daughter of Diane's older sister, Elena Hale, who passed away shortly after your birth." My chest tightened. I had never even heard that name before. Elena, my real mother. "She entrusted Diane with your care, but according to documented statements and testimony from your grandfather, Diane accepted that responsibility under personal pressure, not willingness." That explained everything. The resentment, the coldness, the way she looked at me like I didn't belong. Because to her, I didn't. I was a burden she never wanted, and she made sure I felt it. "For years," Mr. Collins added, "your grandfather attempted to maintain contact with you, but access was restricted." I turned slowly toward Diane. Restricted? She didn't deny it. Didn't even try. She didn't want you forming a connection with him, he said plainly, because his will was always intended to center you. The room shifted. You could feel it. Tension turning into realization, into judgment. The majority of the estate, he concluded, has been legally designated to Ava as Elena's only child. Silence. Then whispers. Then Ethan, finally speaking, his voice low, shaken. You knew? Diane didn't answer right away. When she did, it wasn't emotional. It was defensive. I did what I had to do. I raised her. That should count for something. That was it. No apology, no regret, just justification. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. Like everything finally made sense. Legally, everything moved quickly after that. The estate, properties, savings, investments, was transferred exactly as outlined. There was no room for dispute. The documentation was airtight. Socially, it was worse for her. Family members who once followed her version of the story started pulling away, quietly at first, then more openly, because the truth had a way of doing that. And Ethan? He tried to talk to me afterward, apologize, explain, but some distances don't close overnight. As for me, I didn't walk out of that room feeling victorious. I walked out understanding. Understanding that I was never the problem. I was just placed in the wrong story by someone who never wanted to tell the truth. Weeks later, I visited my grandfather's house. For the first time, it felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because of the money, but because someone, somewhere, had seen me, chosen me, and made sure I would never be erased again.